Mr. Speaker, it would be a terrible thing. Wouldn't it be, Mr. Speaker? Wouldn't it be sad if just one single color was the color you see? If everything was red, white, or green, the only color, the only thing that could be seen. Could you imagine how dull Guyana and the world would be if one single color is all you see? Mr. Speaker, I put it to you and this honorable house that the beauty of us as a people is in our cultural diversity. Mr. Speaker, when I read this budget, Mr. Speaker, I see no culture. Mr. Speaker, Linden represents the microcosm of the plethora of talented young people in Guyana who long for copyright legislation to protect their craft. This demand was asked for, Mr. Speaker, at a youth forum promoted by us in Linden, and it was a plan that was indoctrinated in our plan of a decade of development. I trust that the Honorable Minister would use his 2 years to do so, Mr. Speaker. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, our cultural product is a tourism piece, a tourism magnet the world is yet to discover. Mr. Speaker, as well as the creators of this visionless budget. I trust that the minister not only provide the needed training to enhance the potential, but also invest in the needed infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, when I read this budget, when I peruse the estimates, I see no culture. Mr. Speaker, I must add, I must bear witness for the people of Linden and Region 10. The PPP pointed to an increase in the region's 2020 budgetary allocation. Mr. Speaker, economic growth is largely associated with capital investment. Thus, the APNU-AFC ensured that the region got the necessary investment. However, pages 702 and 703 in Volume 1 of the 2020 estimates tell the real story about the PPP. Region 10 received 150 million less in capital investment in 2020 than that in 2019. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the legend on pages 702 and 703, you see that more than 100 million, or half of the 50% in the 2020 capital budget for Region 10, is all rollover projects of the APNU-AFC. This demonstrates that the PPP did not care to invest where it matters in the region, Mr. Speaker. All the increase in spending reflective in the 2020 budget for Region 10 were in the current expenditure, such as housekeeping, supplies for cleaning, electricity costs, and the normal everyday things. That is the price we have begun to pay as a region, Mr. Speaker, under the PPP administration. We shall not be fooled, Mr. Speaker, by the cheap talk from a proxy minister. No allocation for the Linden Enterprise Network, Mr. Speaker. That is assisting the real man in this depressed community. No budgetary allocation for the Linden Enterprise Network that is helping poor people, that is helping young people, that is helping the women within our community, Mr. Speaker. This is the type of government we have, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in closing, I am compelled to offer my own version of one of the most heart-stirring quotes from the late Martin Luther King Jr., combined with a timeless remembrance poem in Moment of the Henry Boys. This afternoon, as we continue our debates in this hollow halls, we remember quite passionately that just a few days ago, we paid our last respects to two of Guyana's young sons, heinously snuffed away in the prime of their life. They entered the stage of Guyana's history just a few years ago, and in the brief years, they were victims of a sordid act, Mr. Speaker. They played their part well within the space of social and economic confines. Now the curtain has fallen. They have moved through the exit. The drama of their early life has come to a close. But be not fooled, but be not foolishly mistaken, Mr. Speaker. To us, they have thrown the torch. It is ours to hold in the highest quarters of justice, Mr. Speaker. For we know if we break faith with our martyred youths, Guyanese shall not sleep through poppies grown in Flanders field. Mr. Speaker, I call on the Honorable Minister, Charles Rumson, to be different, Mr. Speaker, to be magnanimous and embrace the battalion of ideas, good ideas I have offered for the benefit of all of Guyana, especially our youth. I thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend support to my colleagues on this side of the House in our quest to demonstrate to fellow Guyanese that Budget 2020 does not reflect their needs or interests. But, Mr. Speaker, before I address the reasonably credible fallacies and broken manifesto promise of government presented by the proxy Minister of Finance, the Honorable Juan Ejel, who was very bombastic in spewing venom, not only of the budget, but most recently against one of the most consummate professional and qualified Guyanese women, the Honorable Linda Ms. Amanza Nazir. His cabaret show, Mr. Speaker, was despicable and juvenile. Shame on you, Minister. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, permit me to offer congratulations on your elections as Speaker of the House. I do appreciate your remarks in your debut speech, and I'm very optimistic, Mr. Speaker, that your words will be epitomized by your actions of fairness and impartiality in this August House for the next 2 years. Mr. Speaker, I also offer congratulations to all new MPs on both sides of the House. Indeed, a fresh outlook. Let us serve our people and country well. Mr. Speaker, I am thankful and most humble for the opportunity to serve the coalition and the people of Guyana at this level once more. All praise to Almighty God. Mr. Speaker, I join with you in offering birthday wishes to the big youth, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, I have been entrusted with a responsibility to shadow the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports. But before I delve into the shallowness of what was offered to the ministry, and the minister publicly saying he is pleased with this paltry sum, Mr. Speaker, I believe it would be remiss of me not to make some needed comments on some of the baseless utterances of some members of government. Mr. Speaker, we were regaled by my friend, the Honorable Minister of Labor, about his organizational skills for his ministry and his masterful plan to re-employ and train retirees, a plan that will put thousands of qualified unemployed youths out of a job. What a vision of this youthful cabinet. Is this part of the $50,000, 50,000 jobs that were promised? Mr. Speaker, the AG aspirant Honorable Sanjay Datadin informed the House of all of and all Guyanese of the weaponization of the Caribbean Court of Justice towards the APNU. Mr. Speaker, in his searching to find presentation, he provided us with his layman understanding of the law and how to make bread, while failing to provide us with comments on the budget. But it was understandable, for it doesn't offer much. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable McCoy's theatrical presentation diluted the importance of his office at a time when leadership is needed to commence the order to bring the liberalization of the telecommunications sector intact. Mr. Speaker, Guyanese in the 21st century need multiple options to source cheap and reliable data. The coalition passed the bill into an act. You must run with it now. Tell the House what time and when this will be done. Mr. Speaker, a budget is a nation's statement intended to add to the country's social, cultural, political, and economic development, birthed out of consultations with the citizenry. This budget does not reflect that. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2020 presents an avalanche of political rhetoric, sugar-coated speeches, and broken manifesto promises. It is nothing, Mr. Speaker. It is nothing but a betrayal of the public's trust, while at the same time honoring campaign promises to private sector donors. Mr. Speaker, this big supercilious boast about the completion of this budget is puerile. Mr. Speaker, there is a big difference between being a human being and being human. This budget, Mr. Speaker, was forcefully prepared by human beings, but it lacks the human touch. This budget is punctuated with deception and backward policy measures that will endanger the lives of Guyanese road users and present a clear and imminent danger to our environment. Mr. Speaker, no forward-thinking government in the 21st century would opt for its country to be the dumping ground for used tires and old vehicles. Under the guise, Mr. Speaker, under the guise of promoting business, Mr. Speaker, it is this government, Mr. Speaker, is this the government's plan for Guyana being the Dubai of South America? Is this the plan for prosperity? Reversing ban on used tires, Mr. Speaker, is backward. It increases the risk of accidents and potential loss of life. Have we not had enough carnage on our roads already? Mr. Speaker, is the government so blind that it cannot see the wisdom in using new tires or even reducing the import tax by 50% for importers of new tires? We believe not only ministers' vehicles should have new tires, but all road users. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we support the used vehicle business because it is a lucrative endeavor. But we believe Guyanese deserve the opportunity to be drivers of safe and environmentally friendly vehicles, such as electric cars, resulting in the measures we implemented in allowing only cars 8 years old from its manufacture date, along with concessions for the importation of electric cars, cars of the future, Mr. Speaker. Why the government didn't opt to further reduce the taxes for importation of newer vehicles? Lack of vision. Mr. Speaker, this budget claims to speak to a plan for prosperity. But I'm compelled to ask, prosperity for who? It certainly does not reflect a plan for creating prosperity for the poor, the working class, the doctors, lawyers, teachers, policemen and women, the military, sweeper cleaners. Mr. Speaker, in this 91-page document, I read seeking to find a 50% increase manifesto promise to our public servants in the government's 100-day plans, but I found none. Where is the increase for our senior citizens? This budget, Mr. Speaker, is the Grinch of Christmas. It has taken away the gifts of many little children that a mother, a father, and grandparents wanted to buy. The hope for turkey, chicken, pepper pot beef, and baked chicken on many Christmas plates will be missing because this budget has shown no love to hard-working public servants. They have the audacity, Mr. Speaker, to say that this budget is a people's budget. Mr. Speaker, this big hullabaloo celebration about this $25,000 COVID relief for households is given much fanfare by so many of the government presenters. But it is a measure we welcome, Mr. Speaker. I don't know why they're making a big fuss about this. We do, however, believe, Mr. Speaker, that more should have been given. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, it should not have been a one-off measure because this pandemic has really affected the lives of many households. And how the Minister of Health is handling this crisis, it is a matter of great concern. If the Minister of Health continues to manage the situation as he did as the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sports, we are headed for serious trouble. Mr. Speaker, all who are honest will agree that this $25,000 one-off assistance for families in need is grossly inadequate. Mr. Speaker, why not offer all public servants non-taxable wages and salaries until we return to normalcy and offer the families who are not on the fixed establishment $100,000? That is a weak care measure, Mr. Speaker. Additionally, the $15,000 branded We Care program for school child is another one-off disbursement plan. This will not provide the needed help for our students and their parents, Mr. Speaker. All parents and teachers know that the David Granger 5Bs program is a much more superior one than this sham of a We Care program. If the government really cares, Mr. Speaker, they would do the sensible thing. So I call on the Honorable Minister of Education, Priya. I urge her to appeal to the motherly instinct and continue the 5Bs program that brings real, tangible benefits to the nation's children. Any rebranding, Mr. Speaker, any rebranding should be the 5Bs plus C, computers for all students. The Honorable Charles Ramson, your turn. Mr. Speaker, most of Guyana's youth held the view that the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports needed someone who understood and can have a greater appreciation for the multiplicity of wants and needs of this important demographic within our society. Many held the view that a more youthful person would have been a better fit. But, Mr. Speaker, it is quite obvious. Not every youth is a good youth, and not every youth is a fit and proper youth. Mr. Speaker, that hope we had is short-lived. That hope we had, Mr. Speaker, is short-lived. Even though the youthful minister in his embryonic stage, I must confess, he started off well, Mr. Speaker, visiting and having consultations with several associations, federations, and some athletes and sports journalists to garner ideas and certainly photo opportunities. But to what end, Mr. Speaker? What good are those ideas if proper representation by the minister cannot be made for a respectable budgetary allocation? I know you have tried, Ramson. You're a person like that. But you are not respected, my youth. You are not respected. It is not only a disrespect to you, but is a disrespect to every Guyanese youth. I put it to the Honorable Ramson. Had it been the PPP's former Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Dr. Frank Anthony, arguably one of the not so impressive ministers to hold his portfolio, he would not have been given the least of budgetary allocations. Mr. Speaker, Guyana's youth is so important to this administration that the word youth in this 91-page document referred to by my learned friend as the Fragette document is mentioned only 8 times. Young people are so important that they only got 2.7 billion from a budget $329 billion, the largest to date, a mere 0.3%, Mr. Speaker, 0.3, and the minister is saying he is pleased with the spittons. What a shame. Youth, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, youth, it is a national imperative that we aggressively engage our youth in skill training programs to prepare them for the new and emerging industries in our country. That is why the coalition government expanded and enhanced the training facility and its program at Kurukuru Training College. I note with great interest, Mr. Speaker, the visit to the facility, and I'm confident that the Honorable Minister will see the merits in not only keeping that engine running, but expanding it to offer more to our young people. Mr. Speaker, our youth must also be afforded with an enabling environment and state support to venture innovatively into the cultural industry. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the minister should make representation to establish a fund to benefit youths who can imagine and develop business concepts that seek to alleviate poverty through inward community tourism, utilizing both the built and cultural heritage resources existing in and around their own communities. Mr. Speaker, I urge the Honorable Minister to even go further and establish a national innovation and imagineering center that will serve as an incubator for the development of ideas into viable business models, and to set up a support mechanism to harness corporate social responsibility funds from the existing and emerging private sector, so that growth would be merged out of this, Mr. Speaker. So grow out of the ideas generated into viable youth-driven businesses. Mr. Speaker, the direction of the ministry with the promise of Guyana's youth is blind. As a football enthusiast, I give the honorable member and his government a red card. As a basketball fan, a technical foul. Mr. Speaker, as a lover of the different genre of music, I say the honorable member and his government is off key when it comes to matters relating to culture, youth, and sports. Mr. Speaker, we all know, including the honorable member, that his interest is not here and it could be served better elsewhere. Vikram Bharat, your name calling, brother. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, as a minister for 40 plus days, he is yet to appoint a director of youth.
Honorable member, earlier today, and I think it was one from the opposition side, spoke to the standing order with respect to calling members by their name without using honorable member.
I did say honorable, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, sir, I didn't hear honorable. I heard Vikram back.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, I'm so guided. Mr. Speaker, as minister for more than 40 plus days, he is yet to appoint a director of youth, a director of sport, and members of the National Sports Commission. What is taking you so long to do this simple task? If you have to seek permission, then do so. We have waited long enough, Mr. Minister. Mr. Speaker, the PPP had over 5 months to embrace a new paradigm for sports in Guyana and did zero, as reflected in the size of the budgetary allocation, which seeks to rival that of Labour. Mr. Speaker, we are happy that the government has endeavored to continue our planned program of building 3 multipurpose facilities in regions 2, 6, and 10, as well as completing the 2 synthetic tracks as evident, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this budget and the ministry is bereft of new ideas and is propped up by rollover APNU-AFC projects, some of which are labeled as new. A case in point is the two synthetic tracks in Region 6 and 10, where the resurfacing is deemed as a new activity, as if the project was designed without the track surface, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the PPP formed a COVID committee and were parading on television for months. But to date, Mr. Speaker, the minister with the responsibility for sports cannot announce a protocol for any sports discipline in Guyana. It is no surprise, however, Mr. Speaker, the present Minister of Health was once the Minister of Sport, and his performance always stood out far from positive. Presently, the number of COVID deaths and hospitalization in Guyana in the last 40 days is telling. Honorable Ramson, I must say, in addition to the multi-purpose facilities in Region 10, it could only augur well for all of our athletes who have excelled well at the National Schools Championship and captured the crown for many consecutive years. It is an established fact that Linden has always been Guyana's cradle for culture, youth development, youth movement, and it goes without saying, athletic prowess in all sports disciplines. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports would do the nation a great service if it were to find the merits in the notion of leveraging sports as a platform and a vehicle for social change and social cohesion in Guyana. This ministry, with the National Sports Commission, should work with the Guyana Football Federation to persuade them to follow the lead of their own world governing body, FIFA, which has been partnering with the United Nations agencies and other international civil society bodies to leverage the sport of football in promoting the UN Sustainable Development Goals and broader social change issues. Mr. Speaker, the ministry should forge relationships, partnerships, and memorandum of understandings with local, regional, and international organizations to tackle issues of hate, crime, drugs, racism, violence, and injustice through the different sports disciplines and cultural activities. Mr. Speaker, tourism is a multifaceted sport, and therefore Mr. Speaker, is multifaceted, and sports tourism has its own niche market that the ministry can help to promote, which will contribute to the building of the economy. There are already two major sports disciplines that has the potential, football and cricket, but we can also use basketball and athletics. But it is evident in this private sector budget, in this anti-poor budget, it rather promote golf in the new Pradeville apartheid community. What assurance can the ministry give that a youth from Linden, Tiger Bay, Agricola, Buxton, or any other community for that matter, will get an opportunity to try his or her hands at golf? Mr. Speaker, when I read this budget, when I peruse the estimates, Mr. Speaker, I see no sports. Culture. Mr. Speaker, like sports, we must recognize we live in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multicultural society, and the need for social cohesion among our people is staring us in the face and is calling for an answer, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I put it to this honorable House that the answer is in Guyana's youth. The answer, Mr. Speaker, is in sports and culture. Mr. Speaker, I urge the Honorable Minister to go beyond the mere celebration and promotion of traditions and norms of the Guyanese society. And let's develop a country with a robust cultural industry, with the requisite institutional framework that supports the growth of existing businesses and brands, and facilitate the emergence of the new exciting business ideas and platforms in culture. There is no harm in taking a page out of the book of our sister state, Jamaica. It is time for the emergence of Brand Guyana.